Hey gang, it's your buddy Platt, and we're back today for part 2 of our series on how to make sake. Today, this video is going to focus on something called Shubo, S-H-U-B-O. It is the yeast mash, or you may want to think of it as a yeast starter. What we're going to do right now is considered day 0 of the process. It's the night before we start. We're going to do a little prep. First and foremost, we're going to get our 1 quart jar. We're going to sanitize it, get it ready to go. Next, we're going to take 10 ounces or 1 1/4 cup of clean filtered water. If you don't have good water at home, go buy you some water to have. Luckily, I got a reverse osmosis filter, so we'll use that. Next, with the water, we're going to add a 1/4 or 1/2 teaspoon of our yeast nutrient. In there. Next, we're going to add our 1/2 teaspoon of our lactic acid. Remember, we're making technically a wine, a rice wine, so we need a little balance, a little acidic balance. That is in there. And then last, with the water, we're going to add just a pinch, that's the technical term, a pinch of Epsom salt. If you've ever done home brewing, you'll add a little bit of salt to the water just for water treatment purposes, what have you. We're going to stir this all together. And then in our jar, we're going to put 1 cup of water in the jar, and then in a separate little container, we're going to put a 1/4 cup, or roughly 2 ounces, in that separate container. Just a shade more. And then the rest in our jar. Now, we are going to leave the jar out overnight, and we're going to put this 2 ounces of this water in the refrigerator. Tomorrow we will need just a little bit of cool water, and then this at room temperature, so we'll have that ready to go. Also, the night before, take your koji out of the freezer and put it in the refrigerator, so by tomorrow it'll be ready to go. So this is day 0 on this process. We're ready to go. We'll come back tomorrow to start our yeast mash. Alright, so it's day 1 of the sake making process, and before we get started, the first thing we want to do is to activate our yeast. This is in what's called a slap pack. Inside you'll find a piece, or a hard piece, that holds the yeast nutrient pack in here, or that activates the yeast in here. You'll want to slap that or crack that piece open so that yeast nutrient comes out and starts the yeast. So find the spot there, and then, yep, we'll give her a shake, and then we're going to let her rest. You'll see over the next hour or so, this thing will start to fill out. So we got our yeast started, and next we're going to move on to the rice. Alright, now we're going to take 3/4 cup of our sake rice, and we're going to wash it. Then once we get all the rice dust, any bits of impurity out of here, we're going to soak this in water for 1 hour in cold water. So let's soak this rice and come back. Alright, our next step is to take our yeast that we've activated and put in about 1/2 the pack into the water we created on the night before. You could toss the rest of this if you like, or you could use it for something else. You could use it for homemade wine, or any other kind of, maybe a miscellaneous meat or something miscellaneous fermented project. So that's what we're going to do here. All right, there we go. And we're going to leave the lid slightly loose on that. And next we're going to come back to filter off or take the water off the rice. All right, our next step is to drain off the water from the rice, and then we're going to let this rice sit for about an hour at room temperature on the counter. All right, now that we have our rice drained, our next step is to add 3/8 of a cup, so just a little less than half a cup, of our koji that we've had in the fridge into our yeast water mixture. All right, and we'll want to make sure to leave this at room temperature. When I say room temperature, 70-ish, something like that. So now we got that going, we'll come back to next steam our rice. Okay, so it's been about 1 hour. We let our rice sit out at room temperature, kind of dry out a little bit. Next tip is we're going to let steam. Now that's the key term, is steam. We're not going to boil this rice. So if you have a rice steamer, maybe one of the little bamboo units that sits in water, what have you, that's fine, just as long as we steam it, not boil it. One of the things I see in the instructions and the way they do it in a rice brewery in Japan is steaming. It's just an important part. So we steam. You don't want the rice in contact with water. I've set up kind of a double boiler thing with a little piece of cheesecloth on the bottom. And we're going to steam this rice for 1 hour. So let's come back after the hour's up. Okay, so we let our rice steam for about 1 hour. Then I've taken it off the heat, and I'm going to let the rice cool. I've broken it up a little bit with a spoon. We're going to let this sit for about 10 minutes or so, or until we get down to about 90 degrees. This is where you'll need your thermometer at. Once we get below 90 degrees, we can get to the next step, which is to combine it with our koji yeast water. So let's let this cool down, and we'll come right back. All right, so we've got our rice cooled down. We added it to our koji yeast water mixture. And then if you remember the quarter cup we left in the refrigerator last night, we're going to use that now to pour in and cool down the mixture even more. And then we're going to take a spoon, and we're going to, the term they use is fold, but we're just going to mix everything up for about 5 minutes or so to get our steamed rice, koji, yeast, water, it all thoroughly mixed together. And then later on tonight, we will come back and mix it again, just to keep things stirred up. Again, sake is a very active process, unlike brewing after you on the fermentation. So let me stir this for a couple more minutes, and then we'll come back later tonight to stir it up again. All right, guys, so this is the end of day one, and we're coming back to our jar, and we're just going to stir everything up. We want to make sure the yeast is activating with all the rice that we put in. Also, too, just in case there's any CO2 buildup, because there is a little bit of fermentation probably going on, we want to let out that CO2. Now, for the next 4 days, days 2, 3, 4, and 5 of this process, we'll come back twice a day to this jar, stir it up a little bit, let any CO2 that may be out there escape. And we'll come back on day 6 to kind of finish the process of Shubo, S-H-U-B-O, and get ready for the main batch. So I'll come back and see you on day 6. All right, Platt here, and we're back for day 6. You've probably noticed we had quite a bit of fermentation. Real important part, make sure you keep this lid a little loose. There's quite a bit of CO2 production. So what we're going to do now is we've let this out at room temperature, roughly in the low 70s. What we want to do now is drop that temperature now to around 59, the high 50s. I have a keg fridge that I've used as a fermentation tank or temperature control fermentation tank. You could use something like that. You can use, if you have a wine cabinet that's temperature controlled, what have you, but we need to drop the temperature around 10 to 15 degrees. As you'll see in the future, our fermentation temperatures are a little bit lower than room temperature, so we're going to start that process on day 6 by throwing this in our fridge, start dropping that temperature, and we'll come back day 7 and wrap up the Shubo. Alright, so it's day 7 here. It's the end of the Shubo. Now we need to get it ready for our main mash buildup. First you'll need a 1 gallon sanitized container. I know in the first video I said I'd use a 2 gallon. We're going to build our way up to that. We're going to start off as 1 gallon because it's clear. I want you to see this stuff. And we're just going to take that and we're going to add in the Shubo. Alright. Here, let's give her that business. Alrighty. Then we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of our koji rice that we've left in the fridge. Alright. Take a spoon, we're going to give that a good stir. And next we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of water. I'm going to throw it in here so we can get it all rinsed out. Alright. This is not instructions, but kind of makes sense to do this. Alright, we'll dump that in there. Give her one more quick stir. Now, obviously at the brewery level, this can be a bigger production, but they do kind of do the same thing. They'll take a long wooden paddle and stir this up. This is literally just a smaller version of how they make it in Japan. We're going to put our lid on. We're not going to seal it tight. If you're doing this experiment along with me, you know that there's CO2 buildup. We don't want this tight. Just on enough to cover, but loose enough to let the air out. At this point, we'll put this back into our, I'm putting this into my keg fridge, whatever you need to get it into the high 50s, low 60s temperature-wise. And one more thing before we wrap up, you'll want to set 3/4 of a cup of water in the fridge overnight to cool off. We're going to use that when we begin the main mash. So this is the end of video part 2 of our How to Make Sake series. We'll come back in the next video to do our main mash buildup. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.